very good evening to you and welcome to our program After School English. වෙනද වගේම එකතු වෙලා ඉන්නේ After School English වැඩසටහනත් එක්ක. අද දවසේ අපි කතා කරන්නේ කියවීම ගැන. Today we will be touching on reading and reading techniques, and it's going to be quite an interesting show today. But before we get to that topic, I'm going to introduce you to our teacher who's going to take us through reading techniques and how you could apply them in terms of your regular day-to-day activities. So a warm welcome to the program, Jathika.
Hi.
And it's over to you now to give us a better understanding as to how we could improve our reading skills.
Yes, Sharifa. In any language, we know that we have these 4 aspects called reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So today, our focus is on one of such aspects, which is reading. So actually, do we have something to learn about reading? Is a question that sometimes you might think of, but yes, we can. There are some reading techniques that we can go through. So before moving on, I would also like to touch a little bit on the word technique, Sharifa. Going to the Cambridge Dictionary definition, let me quote it here. They say, a technique is a way of doing an activity that needs skill. Let me repeat it. A way of doing an activity that needs skill. I thought of taking this definition because I thought it would give us a good approach to today's discussion, to further the discussion, because of the word skill actually. So as we most of the time stress on these programs, here today too, I would like to stress the fact that the word skill shows us something about a language. What's that? A skill is something that we can always improve, right? So activity, a technique is a method that we could get something done. So when it comes to reading also, which is an activity that we are going to do today,
පරාර්ථකාමී මිනිසුන් ලෝකය තවත් ලස්සන කරයි.
කියවීම කියන එකත් ඇක්ටිවිටි එකක්, ක්‍රියාකාරකමක්, භාෂාවක යෙදෙන. දැන් අද අපි කතා කරන මාතෘකාව. එතකොට රීඩින් කියවීමටත් මේ වගේ ටෙක්නික් එකක්, ක්‍රමයක්, මෙතඩොලොජි එකක් මෙතඩ් එකක් තියෙනවා. So when it comes to these techniques, they need a skill. හැකියාවක්, දක්ෂතාවක්, කුසලතාවක් කියමු. ඒ වගේ කුසලතාවක්. So when it requires a skill, it also says something which makes us happy as language learners. That is, we always have some room to improve ourselves, because skills are certain things that we can really improve, right? So when it comes to reading skills also, those are things we can improve. That is the reason actually we are here today to introduce a little bit about this technique. We are not going to go into details, but just to introduce these techniques. So when it comes to reading techniques, different educationalists have defined them differently, but let's take a very general outlook of it. So reading techniques, we can have 4 basic techniques: skimming, scanning, thirdly reading intensively, and reading extensively. So skimming, scanning, reading intensively, and reading extensively. So before we talk about the reading techniques in detail, I would also like to say that there are 3 imperative questions where these reading techniques or strategies usually depend on. That is, what am I going to read? What am I going to read? I think Sharifa would take us further with regards to this what question, because we have 2 resource people today.
Absolutely.
Really. So to give us some idea about some of their excellent piece of literature, I suppose. So let's go there also. Maybe
In a short while.
Right.
Yes.
So what am I going to read? Is it a book? Is it a letter from a friend or an SMS or a poem? What am I going to read? And then why? Why am I actually reading it now? Is it for entertainment purposes, for pleasure, or for information? මොන හරි තොරතුරු ලබා ගන්න අපි කියවනවාද? එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි දේ කියවන්නේ සතුටු වෙන්නද? විනෝදාස්වාදය සඳහාද? Why? ඇයි අපි කියවන්නේ? And then third question is, how am I reading it? Should I read it intensively? For example, if it is an academic journal, if we do some research, we might have to refer to some academic journals. අපි academic පැත්තේ මොකක් හරි පර්යේෂණයක් කරනවා කියලා හිතුවොත් අපිට ඒ ආශ්‍රිත ග්‍රන්ථ පරිශීලනය කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. එතකොට සමහර විට අපි intensively කියවන්න පුළුවන්. ඒවා දිගින් දිගටම details we might even go for minute detail as well. So those are the three questions that we may ask before we apply these four reading techniques. Actually, once we learn them, those things will come naturally, automatically, but we are just going to theoretically introduce them to you so that we can improve and we can make this activity called reading better. Kind of, we can facilitate it. Why? Because it's a skill that we can improve. So that is the objective behind all this.
It's pretty interesting, and you did touch upon a letter from a friend, a newspaper, poem. What are we going to read? So I think, Jathika, it's time for us to introduce our resource persons as well who are with us in the studios today. And වැඩසටහන පටන් ගන්නකොටම මම කිව්වා අද දවසේ we have something interesting. අපිට අද කතා කරන්න පුළුවන් different techniques of reading and different types of books which we can read. So we have the authors who are here with us today. We have a biologist, Dr. Jacob de Vlos, and we have with us Mrs. Johanna de Vlos, who is a librarian, who they are obviously a couple, but they have also released a few books together, and it has taken a very, very long time to release this book. It literally took them 15 years, and they are here all the way from the Netherlands. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
So these are the two books. Now there are 3 volumes. There's another book with Jathika, and we will be touching on something really important. So it's called The Illustrated Field Guide to the Flowers of Sri Lanka. So my question to you would be, why Sri Lanka and how?
Well, why Sri Lanka? It is because we have come to Sri Lanka when we were young, before we got children, and it was very nice. After we got children, we said we should, for the education, we show them something of the world. Not just Germany, that's nearby, England is nearby. And then we thought Sri Lanka, that's a very nice country because the people are a little bit different, you have other language, other vegetation, plants, everything. So we thought for the education it is good to take them to Sri Lanka. And my wife liked Sri Lanka already then very much, so it was a common decision. We want to go with our children to Sri Lanka.
I think Johanna can tell us a little bit more about your visits to Sri Lanka, and it took 15 years to compile this book. So as a librarian, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of experience in terms of going through how books are organized, and there's a lot going on inside a library. So I guess your expertise in that helped you put this together as well. So take us through the journey.
Now, it started when we were young in 1977. We went together. I said I like to make the journey of my life before we get children. We did not know if we got children, but we hope to have them one day. So we did so. We were here 4 weeks. It was a nice country. We saw everything, almost. And then what he told when our daughters, we had 2 daughters, when they were 13 and about 16, we decided to visit Sri Lanka again. So in between, we were not here. So when they were here, they said, where can we go another time? Sri Lanka is so beautiful. Can we go again? I said, we first have to save some money because it's expensive to go there. Okay, we did so. After 2 years we went again. And so in the time of the years I came here with one of our daughters. She learned Sinhala, she learned to speak Sinhala, she learned to write Sinhala in 5 years or so. It was difficult, but she did. And then he also liked to come again to Sri Lanka, and then I liked to go with my younger daughter, and he liked again. But by that time he was always looking for books on flowers and plants, but there were almost no books about. So then, now you can tell how it went on.
Well, there were books on flowers, but there were, let's say, 200 kinds of flowers in them. But in Sri Lanka there are 4,000 kinds of flowers, 4,000 trees and small herbs, everything. So we thought you need a book with more flowers on it. And then we decided to try to make a book on flowers. That is how it began.
And the combination worked well.
It was a good combination. And we had a tough discussion because I said we do every flower, even if it is very small. And she said I like to have flowers
Bigger.
In gardens and so. And we came to a compromise. We did the small flowers, but we did not, and we did some plants along the road. So that was a compromise. And there we went. You can imagine that if we started with nothing. There were some books on flowers, but without illustrations. And we thought people need an illustration, a photograph. So that's why we hired a car, a van, and the driver should stop at every plant. You can imagine, if you have never been in Sri Lanka looking at flowers, if you have driving 50 meters, 20 meters,
Stop.
you see a plant, stop. So we photographed every plant, and that was the beginning of volume 1.
That was the beginning of volume 1, but it didn't stop there. We have 3 volumes of the book, which is quite interesting. And thank you so much for sharing the journey. And I can see that Mrs. Johanna really loves the country, so she had a reason to visit the country over and over again. So I think Jathika can give us like a slight translation of what we just discussed.
Yes, to touch upon it briefly, අපි කෙටියෙන් ඒ ගැන සඳහන් කරනවා නම් ඒක වසර 15ක් තිස්සේ ඔවුන්ගේ මහන්සිය ප්‍රතිඵලයක් Dr. Jacob සහ ඔහුගේ yes එතකොට Dr. Jacob වගේම Mrs. Johannaත් එක වගේම මහන්සි වෙලා තියෙනවා මොකද දෙන්නගෙම ඒ පිළිබඳ තිබුණු කැමැත්ත සහ ආසාවත් ගැළපීලා තියෙන හින්දා Dr. Jacob කියපු විදිහට. ඉතින් එතකොට flowers මල් ගැන ඒගොල්ලෝ පරිශීලනය කරන්න යනකොට Dr. Jacob කියනවා ටිකක් දුර ගිහිල්ලා එක දිගට යන්න බැහැලු මොකද යන තැන මල් වගේ ඒ ලස්සන දේවල් තියෙනවා මල් වර්ග ඖෂධ වර්ග. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒගොල්ලන්ට හුඟක් මහන්සියක් ගන්න වෙලා තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලෝ හරි සන්තෝෂෙන් කතා කරේ ඒක ආස්වාදජනක අත්දැකීමක් විදිහට. ඉතින් ඒ මල් බලාගෙන ගැන කටයුතු කරලා අවුරුදු 15ක් තිස්සේ ඒ පිළිබඳ වෙහෙසිලා තමයි පොත කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
Jathika, අපි අද දවසේ කතා කරන්නේ කියවීම ගැන. So I guess with this book we can give our viewers an idea as to different types of reading, and you mentioned that some are for pleasure, some are for information. So this is the book which comes which actually connects to the latter, I guess, for information.
Yes, actually I asked Dr. Jacob also about it just before the program when I saw this book. When I got this in hand, I was also thrilled, and then I asked him, maybe this is not only for information, perhaps for pleasure as well. I was jokingly asking him. Yeah, definitely it is for information. තොරතුරු සඳහා පරමාර්ථය වෙලා තියෙන එක. So with that objective in mind, they have compiled this book to guide people who are interested in flowers. මේ වගේ ආවේනික මල් වර්ග ගැන දැනගන්න අවශ්‍ය අයට ඒ පිළිබඳ මඟ පෙන්වීමක් ලබා දීමේ අරමුණින් කරපු පොතක් නිසා අපිට මේ පොත හිතන්න පුළුවන් තොරතුරු ලබා ගැනීමට අයිති වෙන පොතක් විදිහට.
අපි ටෙක්නික් එක ගැනත්
කතා කළොත් ඔව් එතකොට ස්කිමින් පැත්තට අපි යොමු වුණොත් ස්කිමින් කියන්නේ when it comes to skimming, that is like we just glance it through. We wouldn't go in depth. We would use this technique when we have to find the gist of the passage. At times we call gist reading also for skimming. That is because, okay, I'll give you one real example. When this producer here told me about their book, I got one review, and then even though everybody was talking about it, I wanted to make sure whether it's really interesting. So what I did was just skimming. I just read it through the review. What's the main idea? Oh, flowers. And then I found, oh, it has to be really important. That is skimming. You glance it through to find the gist of the passage. What's it really about? And then afterwards, of course, I didn't want to stop it there. So I had to scan it a little bit more for specific information. And I found many interesting, and I didn't have much time. If I had, I would have gone through it for a long time for specific information. And I found very interesting terms. And I also wanted to find, what about Nelly? Because in our garden we have Nelly, a fruit. And then I wanted to find whether it is there in the book, scanning. So what's scanning actually? When we want to find some specific information somewhere, අපිට particular information යම් තොරතුරු අදාළම තොරතුරක් හොයාගන්න ඕනේ නම් අපි we locate facts by looking over the text very quickly, and we reject or ignore irrelevant information. අපිට අදාළ නැති information අපි ඒවා අයින් කරමින් මේක කියවගෙන යනවා අපිට ඕන information හම්බ වෙනකම්. That is scanning. So reading intensively would be reading for detail. That is reading in detail with specific aims and tasks in mind. We have some, maybe it could be a research task, we have that in mind, and then we read intensively, usually textbooks and all. So this book actually we can use for all those purposes, I suppose, even though technically speaking it's for information. When I was going through this, for me it was not only information but also some pleasure as well. But don't get me wrong, it is theoretically speaking that usually goes with creative writing. For pleasure, like short stories, novels, poems. Now for example, we wouldn't read this book as the way we would read a poem. අපි poem එකක් කවියක් කියවන විදිහට මේ පොත කියවන්නේ නැහැ. So there we will apply some other reading techniques. Moving on to reading extensively, this is where we rest our eyes on short stories or novels, where we would read it for happiness, for pleasure, for entertainment. And sometimes to develop our reading skills also, this would be a good type of a technique that we can use. So when it comes to this book, I asked Dr. Jacob actually, what's this word Nelly is?
Yes.
Is it really the Sinhala term or something different? I asked him, shall we try that also?
Let's
yes,
try,
practically.
because this is a different way of reading.
This is a field guide. So very interestingly, they have included both Sinhala and Tamil names also with regards to this. So I asked him about this word Nelly, which comes in the index. This is the index. So here in the index of Sinhalese names, we get N. This is the way that when we refer to a telephone directory also, we wouldn't read from A to Z, right? You just try to find information what we really want. So here I applied that technique. I wanted to find whether Nelly is there. And then L-M-N, it is in the alphabetical order. So I went it through and finally found it, but I read it several times to ensure whether it was really Nelly. Dr. Jacob?
Yeah.
I'm sure Dr. Jacob can help us
Yeah, it is
find.
141 from the index. We found it as Nelly, and then we would go to 141, the page, and he would like to tell us something about that. So very easily we could find the page there, 141, and for very specific information, I'm now referring the guide because I want to find what it really is. Is it Nelly that we know or something else?
Something else, exactly.
So 141 ඇත්තටම මේ අපි දන්න නෙල්ලි කියන පදයේද එහෙම නැත්නම් වෙන දෙයක්ද? එතකොට specific information සඳහා අපි මේ කියවීම කරන්නේ. දැන් මේ techniques වැඩිපුර පාවිච්චි කරන්න අපිට මේක it would be our second nature. It would be really easy for us to facilitate the activity. That is the reason why we are doing this. Just a reminder to why we are doing it again. So, so 141, and yes, Dr. Jacob, maybe we can
elaborate
tell
on
you
the
something about a Nelly?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Jacob, now we have found this word here.
Yeah.
And yes, without my explaining it, let's see what he has to say.
Well, there's a book on plants, so you need the name of the plant. And Nelly is there, but the scientific name is Philanthus emblica. Perhaps not so interesting for you. It is Nelly anyway, and in Tamil the name is Topu Nelly. So there's also a Tamil name. And now you get a description, and reading a book on flowers that is very intense, because you have to check the flowers, and it is a tree anyway, and the flowers are not very large, half a centimeter across, and the leaves, something about the leaves, and all the time you can think, is it really a Nelly or is it perhaps something else? But if everything is all right, and the fruits are there, 2.5 to 3 centimeter diameter,
Yes.
sour but edible. If you have a Nelly tree and you have the berries there, they are a picture of the berries here, then you can see, well, that's a Nelly. Perhaps you are wrong, then you have to look to another plant. Shall I tell you how you find the other plant? Or does
Yes,
it take
I
too much
think
time?
yeah, we would love
Well,
to hear.
the easiest way to find a plant, if you do not know it, that is to use the color key.
Yeah, so what I'll do is, even I can
No,
show it from this end.
You have the color
Yes.
key.
So
If you have a white flower, then it is in page 15 to 115. So then
Right.
you know there you have to start. Then you go to page 6 and 7,
Page 6
6
and
or
7.
7,
right.
because there you can see pictures of flowers with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or more petals, flower leaves.
Hou je boek nog even omhoog.
And then you say, oh, it has 6 flower leaves, then they should go to a certain page, and then you find all the white flowers with 6 petals. Then you have a way to go through the book. Otherwise, if you go to all the flowers, it would be difficult to find one. So the reader is helped a little bit by the structure of the book.
Exactly.
Anyway, we hope that people in Sri Lanka have joy about finding a plant in this book. And that was the
Exactly.
purpose of my wife and me.
Exactly, and this is such a dedication, I'd say, for 15 years. And you mentioned that you had to work from home and visit Sri Lanka many times to find all these flowers, put it into a book, and then you realized one is not enough, so there's 3. So what's really special about this book is that even an amateur who doesn't know anything about plants can find out the name and the details of the plants. And it's interesting that you put whether it's edible or not, because sometimes people can go wrong. And it's very helpful. So coming from a biologist to a librarian, what a combination, I'd say. And Jathika, I think අපි ආවිලා තියෙන්නේ වැඩසටහනේ අන්තිම කොටසට. අපි as of a final words, can we just also talk a little bit about how reading
May I
helps?
say one small thing?
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Volume 1 was made by us, everything,
Perfect.
the pictures, the descriptions, everything. But when after Volume 1 there were Sri Lankan naturalists who said, oh, that's interesting, I have also some pictures. When they wrote to us that they had pictures, I always wrote back, very nice, may I use it for a Volume 2? 50% of the pictures in volume 2 are from Sri Lankan photographers. And for volume 3, 87% was made by Sri Lankans. So it is a cooperation between us together and Sri Lankan naturalists, and that is very nice.
Yes, let me translate it
Please,
for
yes.
our audiences. Dr. Jacob කියන්නේ මල් ගැන කරපු පළවෙනි වොලියුම් එක පළවෙනි වෙලුම පස්සේ ලොකු ප්‍රතිචාර ලැබුණලු ලංකාවේ පිරිසගෙන් ඔවුන් ඉදිරිපත් වෙලා 50%.
Yeah.
50ක් විතර පින්තූර ඡායාරූප අරන් දීලා තියෙනවා ඩොක්ටර් ජේකබ්ට. ඒව එකතු වෙලා තියෙනවා වොලියුම් දෙවන වෙලුමේදී. ඊට පස්සේ තුන්වෙනි වෙලුම වෙද්දී 86%
Yeah.
86ක් විතරම පින්තූර ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලාංකික ඡායාරූප ශිල්පීන්ගෙන්. ශ්‍රී ලාංකිකයින්ගෙන් තමයි ඒ ඡායාරූප ලැබිලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඩොක්ටර් ජේකබ් කියන්නේ ඒක හොඳ සුසංයෝගයක් දෙන්නගෙම කියලා සහ පොතට ලාංකික දායකත්වයක් ලැබුණ බවයි සඳහන් කරන්නේ.
Exactly, and this is also a very different experience as well for us and for everybody else who'd love to learn about flowers and plants and whatnot. And I think අපි trip එකක් වගේ යනවා නම් පොත refer කරන්න පුළුවන් to get to know more details about the types of flowers and what we see around, because Sri Lanka is a beautiful tropical country with a lot of plants and flowers, isn't it?
Sure.
So thank you so much, Dr. Jacob De Vlos and Mrs. Johanna De Vlos, for taking time out of your busy schedules, visiting Sri Lanka and being a part of the show as well. Thank you very much, and all the very best for the journey, and I'm pretty sure there'll be more coming on. If someone really tries to ask you to do something, probably you'll help them, but hoping to see you again in Sri Lanka very soon.
Okay.
It was
Hope
yeah.
Yeah, nothing.
Ja, zeg maar.
Next.
It was a pleasure for us to be here and to give this interview.
Thank you so much once again, and thank you so much for all the effort you've put into this.
It was a nice task.
Thank you so much. And with that, it's time for us to wind things up on our program After School English. And thank you very much, Jathika, as well, for giving us a beautiful guide to the importance of reading skills. And reading skills api badaduratat improve karagattama, we can also write creatively, isn't it?
Definitely, yes. Reading will facilitate the other skills as well.
With that, it's time for us to wind up After School English. And Thank you so much.